Good. Welcome to the Scrutiny Programme Committee. I've got for item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any since Bridge? None I've got down here.
Chair, not aware of any apologies.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Kate Jones then to conduct the roll call. If that's okay. Please unmute yourself before responding because you're all muted. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Start with Councillor Cyril Anderson. Councillor Anderson. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Here.
Councillor Louise Gibbard.
Here.
Councillor Joe Hale.
Yeah, present.
Councillor David Helliwell.
Present.
Councillor Terry Hennigan. Councillor Peter Jones.
Present.
Councillor Kirshner. Councillor Wendy Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Gloria Tanner.
Present.
Councillor Will Thomas.
Present.
Councillor Mike White.
Present.
Tees, David Anderson Thomas. David Anderson Thomas.
I think he may be present.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's showing. Yeah, he's showing.
Alexander Roberts.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Copdees. Councillor Chris Holly.
Present.
Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams.
Present.
Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Present.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. On to officers. Bridge Madaha, Scrutiny Team Leader.
Here.
Stephanie Williams, Legal.
Present.
And Kate Jones here, Democratic Services Officer. Anybody I've missed or joined after the beginning of the roll call? No? Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kate. Disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Anyone got any interest they wish to declare? No. Okay, thank you. Item 3 then, prohibition of whipped votes and declaration of party whips. Anybody got anything they want to tell us? No. Okay, in that case, we move on to the minutes on item 4 of the 25th of August. And so go through those for accuracy, starting with page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. People content that the minutes are accurate? I shall take your silence as consent. Thank you, everybody. In that case, we should move on to item 5, public question time. I don't believe any questions have been received, Bridge. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair. None.
Okay, thank you. In that case, then item 6, which is the annual scrutiny work programme review. I'm going to ask Bridge to take us through this report, if that's okay. Thanks so much, Bridge.
Thank you, Chair. If I could, I think the first thing to say that this is good practice, and good for us that it's actually usual practice to reflect on work carried out, the experience, the effectiveness of the work programme, the scrutiny practice, and of course exchange ideas about future work and the improvement of scrutiny. So this is the final meeting of this municipal year, and actually it's always a good precursor to our annual reporting as well. And despite busy work plans, I think time well spent to have a focused meeting like this. So committee members are encouraged to take advantage of this opportunity, really. I think it's worth mentioning that the committee would usually monitor and keep abreast of the overall work of scrutiny, every month at its meeting, but it's actually been, I think, 6 months since it did, because of course it's not been business as usual since March for obvious reasons. The report before you in the agenda, I hope, provides you with a clear picture of the last year, one that's actually been longer than normal, and that it lays out everything that you need to reflect on things. You know, we can't, of course, ignore the impact that both COVID-19 and resources have had this year on the work that you've been able to do. So there's quite a lot in the report, but I think helpful to break it down into 3 distinct parts for you to consider, really. Firstly, you have a summary of work completed, so that's covered in section 4. So this is work done by the committee, but just not the committee, the inquiry and performance panels and working groups against the agreed work programme, which is also included in your papers as Appendix 1. So you can see the range of activities described in these pages, and also in Appendices 2 and 3, to hold cabinet members and decision making to account, provide challenge on various policy and service issues, monitor performance and finances, examine issues of concern and make recommendations for improvement, and follow up on these. All of these are efforts to make a difference. There's also some data about public involvement and media coverage over the past year. That's in section 5. The second part is about the scrutiny experience and improvement and development. So section 6 covers that. So here, committee members are encouraged to share their views on how their experience has been. Hopefully many positives, but there may well be some issues around the work programme and scrutiny practice and process. I would say it's not easy or straightforward to measure the performance, success, or impact of scrutiny. However, what you'll see in the papers is a range of relevant statistics about the scrutiny activity over the last year. That's attached in Appendix 4, that perhaps may be helpful to that end. Though of course we've already acknowledged that circumstances have meant certainly doing less this year than compared with previous. Notwithstanding the fact that, as the chair mentioned, that there are some specific proposals in item 7 in the report that's in the agenda pack about improving the focus of the committee with consequential adjustment to the overall work programme, for your agreement. But based on your self-evaluation and reflection, the committee consider whether and what other action should also be taken that will improve and develop scrutiny. Also attached as a point of reference is what the Wales Audit Office is saying about what good scrutiny looks like. So I guess you could hold that up as a mirror against our practice. Now, I think what we do in Swansea, what you do, holds up well against that advice. But of course, there's always room for improvement. Finally, in this section, there's progress against previously agreed by yourselves, scrutiny improvement objectives. And this includes actions in response to the Wales Audit Office review, which you'll remember that they did of our scrutiny arrangements in 2018. And that's in Appendix 6. So obviously I would invite comments and observations on that. But I think the review of the current improvement plan shows only a small number of outstanding actions, things yet to do. Therefore, the committee may actually want to identify other improvement objectives, going forward. And then the third part is about developing the future work programme, and there's some advice there in section 7. So the current plan is always the best starting point. So as well as new topics, the work programme will need to consider the continuation of current activities, either because of their importance, or because work may well be incomplete. So paragraph 7.4 lists the activities that I would say need to be carried over. But what you'll also see is there are a number of topics outstanding from the current work programme, of course impacted by both COVID and resources, which the committee will need to consider alongside new topic suggestions, whether they need to remain in the work programme. What you'll see there is an inquiry topic that was briefly commenced, but obviously on hold. There's a number of working group topics there, where with conveners already appointed by the committee. Paragraph 7.5 lists the ongoing activities. So here we're talking about performance panels and the regional scrutiny that's in place. That unless changes are necessary, we would expect to continue. But it would be helpful for some clarity from the committee regarding the continuity of performance panels or likelihood of changes, so that certainly our team members can get on with planning future meetings and setting dates for the year ahead. The Cabinet Forward Plan is also included in the papers, so as usual, we would provide this to each committee meeting, so you can review and identify anything significant that might merit pre-decision scrutiny. I know that Chair, yourself and at least one other member, I think Councillor Lyndon Jones, have asked to look at the upcoming report on proposals for the relocation of the Civic Centre to a new public sector hub. And that's listed for decision at November's Cabinet. It's shown in your papers as October, but it has been pushed back. So we can certainly add that, if that is your wish, to November's committee agenda. Important each year to the development of the work programme, we are looking to arrange a remote work planning conference, consultation event, so that the committee can obviously take into account wider views on the work of scrutiny to help ensure that the focus is always on the right things before the committee itself agrees the overall work programme and priorities. So again, it would be helpful for the committee as agreement on whether we could perhaps hold that on the 13th of October at 4 p.m. in place of actually what is the scheduled committee meeting slot, but that has been typical in previous years. So of course we can start preparing for that, and for this we would invite all scrutiny councillors to participate, to gather their views on the programme and scrutiny topic suggestions. I think looking at the time now, with an aim to develop a programme, say for the next 18 months, and I say that because of the delayed start, you'll all be aware, to the new municipal year. It may well be worth developing a plan for scrutiny that takes us, in fact, up to May 2022. But of course, that would remain under review by the committee, with changes made as necessary. Taking into account then sort of all relevant considerations, the work programme can then be confirmed at the November committee meeting. So so just quickly run through that, Chair. So with all of that, Chair, I welcome the committee's thoughts, whether it's about the past year, present times, interesting as they are, or indeed what's ahead, and leave you to discuss. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bridge. Can anybody have any comments at all on the report or Bridge's introduction to it?
Alexander Roberts, just a comment, please.
Yeah, of course, Alex. Yeah.
Thank you. Just on page, it's 7.5 right at the end. Yeah, thank you, Bridge. It's the education panel rather than the schools panel, the performance panel. So just to qualify.
Sorry,
that.
Error on my part. Yeah, of course.
No problem. Yeah, well, it was before anyway. I think anyway, wasn't it? Just to say that because of as a thought moving forward, education. What does that mean? Typically, we on the panel, and perhaps this is a discussion on the panel rather than here, but I'll just give you my tenet anyway. We discuss schools, and we have Jen Rayner and everyone coming along, and it's all about schools and things like that, which is brilliant and really, 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 really useful. But if it's about education, what does that mean? And I haven't got the answers here, but I'm just throwing that question in. Do we want to think more widely about what that panel is doing, or have we already got enough on our plate? Yeah. So just a question. Thank you.
I think in response to that, I think it's the panel has got a remit, and if the panel wants to expand that remit, then by all means come back to us with your thoughts on that, rather than have a more philosophical discussion now, if that's okay. Right, I've got Terry Hennigan.
Yeah, sorry, late signing in. Last half hour just trying to get into this Microsoft Teams. I don't know if anybody else has had the same problem, but it took me more than half hour to get on. That's all, Pete. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Mike White.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Bridge, just to say, on the report of 2018 when we had the audit done, to take information back from Scrutiny, councillors who were on different committees. I felt that was very advantageous to us as a council. It was very, very positive on the response that we was feeding back. So I felt that meeting was very, very well actually put over with people that come down to speak to us. Just a possibility. Obviously, we know there's two main topic areas that we can't get away from. Obviously, Brexit and COVID. We certainly have to look at areas of there how it's going to affect services. But in regards to the conference coming up, Bridge, would it be possible perhaps you could circulate a sort of questionnaire to councillors asking if they got any sort of interest in areas that they would like to look at, so we could try and encourage more engagement?
I think, Bridge, that would be a good way forward, because we're not going to be able to break off in teams, are we, on a remote conference? So I think that sort of questionnaire would be quite useful.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Chair. Other ways need to be thought of, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Jeff Jones.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Bridge perhaps didn't mention about the shortage of staff that Scrutiny have actually worked under during the last year. I think one of the researchers, or the researcher, was actually off on maternity leave, and of course we lost Bethan, and we've got this new young lady, Emily Davis, actually joining the team now, so that should aid us actually going forward. And yes, Mike White actually mentioned the audit visit. I think all the audit visits we've actually had in Swansea since Scrutiny started have been very positive, but we can only add to that. So I want to say.
I think, in fact, that Selma, the researcher, is off on maternity till the new year. But I did have a meeting with the Deputy Chief Executive, and he's offered to try to put in any research capacity which is needed by the panels if they want to do anything more in depth. So, if panels or the committee feels you want to do some surveys or a bit of research, then we can go to the Deputy Chief Executive and say, can you provide some staff time to do that on our behalf? So we're trying to get some cover for that as best we can. So please bear that in mind, particularly in the panels when you're looking at in depth at various issues. Peter Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on your comments there. Research support is very important, and certainly with my panel, with the natural environment, there's a considerable amount of work that could be done. So I'd be grateful for whether through you, Chair, or directly from the Deputy Chief Executive, contact with people who could be assisting in that regard. Otherwise, what I wanted to say, because one doesn't often get the opportunity to say it, I want to thank Bridge and his team under incredibly difficult circumstances. You've mentioned already, or it's been mentioned already, the loss of staff for perfectly good reasons during the course of the last year or more. And then, of course, COVID, to state the obvious. And I think this report and all the appendices show the enormous amount of work that they have done on our behalf. I mean, obviously, we are the committees, we are the panels, we do all the talking and hopefully get some things done. But nevertheless, to get it all recorded so comprehensively and effectively and clearly, I think is very impressive. And I would like to, I hope on behalf of all this committee, thank Bridge and his colleagues for what they do. Otherwise, I just wanted to say, I think, given that we've got your discussion paper coming up under item 7, I think more of the issues can probably be addressed under the discussion in that paper than perhaps discussing this one. Thank you, Chair.
I think that was my intention, Peter. Thank you. I'd also reflect the thanks to Bridge and the Scrutiny staff. I mean, they haven't been at full strength for most of well, for quite some considerable time. So certainly they've done an absolutely extraordinary job, particularly through the lockdown, in trying to get Scrutiny back up and running as well as part of this. And as Peter said, the detail is there. On the research side, when I was an Assembly member, the Senate spends hundreds of thousands of pounds on research to back up committees. So I'm not expecting that sort of support, but I think I do understand the importance of research in terms of supporting Scrutiny. It always helps to have a third party looking at this thing separate from the officers of the cabinet member, which is able to put an input in. So that's why I've been very keen to try to get some research support in here for the panel. So if people have particular research requests, then please come to us and we'll do our best to try to assist with that. Will Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Just one question. Are we working through the work plan today, or is that up next?
We're going to work through item 7, which is a way forward in terms of the work plan. And then the plan is to hold the Scrutiny conference on the 13th of October, where we'll try to set a work plan for the next, well, until 2022 elections. But in doing that, we're going to have to try to keep some flexibility, because as Mike White has already mentioned, we have Brexit and we have COVID, two very huge subjects which are impinging on all our activities.
Yeah, because one of the things I'd just like to bring up, I mean, when we had Peter, when did we do the leisure and tourism working group? I think it was within this last year, wasn't it?
I'm trying to remember. I think we reported, I think, round about June of last year.
Yeah.
That long ago. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Because what I found frustrating about that, for example, is like you do a working group and you barely scratch the surface and you're left with huge amounts of questions, and you get answers on a few of them, or maybe you have some constructive conversations, but there's not really the time to sort of delve into these things like an inquiry, obviously. And I think Peter's brought it up in the past. It's almost like a follow-up meeting to the working group, and I'm just wondering if I don't know what the workload's like, obviously, and what the capacity's like, but I do think if we are gonna, really take these things seriously that we're putting forward, then they do need sometimes a follow-up meeting or something. So that's just wanted to bring that up really at this stage.
Yeah, I agree with you, Will. I think it's important that we do revisit scrutiny exercises to see what's happened with the recommendations, and to go back to the cabinet member if necessary to say, well, why are you doing this, why are you not doing that, etc. So yeah. I agree, and that's what we're trying to do, is create some flexibility to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think in a meeting environment rather than a letter is the best. And just in case I'm not here when you discuss it later, I have emailed you over an idea for a working group.
We'll come to that on the 13th of October, Will, if that's okay, when we come to look at the actual programme. Yeah, because one thing that the next report is about is trying to create some space for working groups to meet again, and also not just in terms of our time, but also in terms of staffing capacity as well. Peter Jones.
Yes, very quickly, picking up, Chair, if I may, on Will's comments in relation to the tourism working group, which I chaired about a year and a half, whenever it was, ago. What was interesting about that in terms of how we then proceeded is that, as I think Bridge has noted somewhere in all these papers, we submitted a report to Cabinet rather than a letter, setting out various recommendations and so on. That then produced an action plan report back from Cabinet. So at least using that mechanism, we were able to get more of a response than perhaps we would through the hitherto traditional method of a letter. And I think that's something we need to bear in mind. We can discuss that further under item 7, I suspect. Thank you.
That's always been my preferred method of working, Peter. And although the homelessness group produced a letter, we did have clear recommendations in it in exactly the same way. And both homelessness and the leisure group is something I want to revisit, to look at that action plan to make sure that that's being delivered as part of that. But we'll discuss that in more detail on the 13th. I'm sure Bridge has made a note, and Bridge is going to come in now anyway.
Yeah, Chair, really just the whole issue of kind of following up on responses regarding working group activity. A bit of a tricky one, really. And these are all resource issues. It's all about capacity. So, but just to sort of, the current position is that working groups produce either a report or a letter, which presumably asks for a response given. And it's the committee really that is the sort of domain, has the overall responsibility. So it's about finding space in the committee work plan, again relevant to the discussion coming up, where you can actually, as members have said, give a little bit of time to that follow-up. But that's where it belongs. We haven't really had the resource or capacity to have then a further standalone meeting of that working group, as for I think hopefully reasons that you'll understand. So, but yeah, it's all very much something that we could all review and reflect on, and and it's up to the committee to think about that, make changes, but of course look at the resource impact on that as well as implications. So so that's all I wanted to say really on the working group issue there that's been raised. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Unless there's any more contributions, I'm going to move on to the next item. But can we just agree before we move on to the next item that we hold a conference on the 13th of October in place of the actual programme committee meeting, which will invite all scrutiny councillors to contribute ideas for the work programme leading up to May 2022. Is that okay with everyone? Terry, do you want to come in? Sorry.
Just support what you said for the 13th of October, 4 o'clock. That seems fine to me.
Okay, so I take it unless anyone objects that's going to be okay with everyone. I'm not going to take a formal vote. I'm just giving you a few more seconds to object if you think that's Jeff?
Yeah, I'm not going to object, but are we going to actually hold this remotely again, or can we hold it in the chamber?
The proposes a remote conference, Jeff, at this stage. Especially the way things are going with COVID at the moment, I think that's most probably our only option in front of us. So we are going to have to think through how we do it, because we won't be able to do it in how we've done it in the past. We're going to have to think through how we do it properly.
Yes.
But I think Mike's, whoever it was suggesting, Mike, a questionnaire would be quite useful in terms of ideas and stuff as one way forward as part of that. Okay, right. So I'm taking that's agreed. I'm going to move on to item 7. Which is the Future Scrutiny programme. Welcome to Cyril Anderson. So on the Future Scrutiny Committee work plan, this report has already been discussed informally, and this is bringing to you now for formal decision, if you like, as part of that. So I'll just briefly go through what's in here. The idea is that we're going to just move things around slightly, try to create some extra capacity, both in the programme committee and give the panels a bit more head to do things in more depth. And the reason for that is we can free up some scrutiny staff to staff some working groups, but also we can be a bit less formal in terms of how we operate as a performance as a programme committee, which enables us to do things like revisit recommendations from previous reports, and maybe leave some of the scrutiny of cabinet members to the performance panel who they report to as well, to create some of that space for that. So basically there's 3 main points in here. First of all, moving away from routine monthly cabinet Q&A sessions to create space to pick up on specific issues of concern for focused decisions at committee meetings. We still have a Q&A session with the leader. We still have Q&A on an as required basis for other cabinet members. So for example, I just mentioned the homelessness strategy, which is I think coming up for its 1-year anniversary shortly. That might be one thing we might want to bring back that particular cabinet member to look at in some depth, and similar with other things like that. And of course we have COVID. We may want to spend a session looking at COVID. Given where we are with Brexit, we may want to spend several sessions looking at Brexit. So we're just trying to create some space to be able to do that sort of thing as part of that. Secondly, subject to agreement, carrying out scrutiny of the Public Service Board via committee meetings instead of the 2 meetings per year of the standalone performance panel, which again will create capacity to support more standalone working groups. We will have to have the cooperative members of that particular Public Services Board on our committee for those 2 sessions. But again, it just creates some staff time to do some more work and give us a bit more in-depth looking at through the working groups. And then the third one, which hopefully is not too controversial, just changing the frequency of adult services and child and family service performance panels. Currently, adult services meets every month, but child and family services meets every 2 months. And I think it's important that child and family support services have a similar level of scrutiny. So the proposal is to move both of those to 6 weekly. So we have a much more meetings to look at those issues without actually undermining the scrutiny which is going on as part of that. Those are the 3 main issues in the paper. So I'm just going to open it up for comments. So Terry Hennigan first. You're muted, Terry.
When we commission a report, we take it to cabinet with the recommendations. Usually the recommendations are passed. Who's following up that those recommendations are taking place?
Well, I would argue, Terry, that's our job. And I think that's one of the reasons why I want to have a bit more flexibility built into the system so that we can bring those back to us after a period of time to say, well, what's happened as a response to this report or that report, and have the cabinet member back to give us an update on the recommendations.
Yeah, whenever I chaired any of the panels or working groups, I always made sure I went back to check to see if those recommendations were being carried out. If not, why not? And if I couldn't get no answer, come back then to Scrutiny Programme Committee for discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the performance panels, I would hope, are doing that anyway as part of their scrutiny and they're going to take more responsibility for actually scrutinising the cabinet member to create that flexibility. So they'll need to do more of that as well, I think, as part of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Peter Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just picking up on that last point, if I may, first of all, and to reassure Terry, my own performance panel on natural environment, at our meeting just a couple of weeks ago now, we did a full review of the recommendations that have been put forward under the auspices of the Natural Environment Inquiry Panel and went through all 20 recommendations. We had the relevant cabinet members present, 2 of them, and were able to pursue the issues there. And obviously we will continue to do that as a panel in the coming months. What I wanted to say, I think this is a very thoughtful and helpful document on the whole. And I understand where it's coming from and the methods that are processes that are being suggested in order to free up time, particularly for this committee. Slightly concerned about where it might leave some performance panels in relation to areas of responsibility. I take on board completely that, in fact, what is being proposed here will, if anything, strengthen or increase the role of performance panels, particularly in relation to the relevant cabinet members working within their portfolio areas. But of course, if this committee, the SPC, then takes on responsibility for major issues of concern, as it says here, topics of concern, yes, that's fine. But we've got to be careful that we don't tread on the toes of the performance panels in doing that. And I'll just give you, to me, the fairly obvious examples. We've just had in the last few days reports from the Living Planet Index, also under the auspices of WWF, relating to biodiversity decline globally. We've also had a report from my former employers, the RSPB, on a similar topic with reference to the UK. Now, the SPC might say, my goodness, that's important. We'd better have a look at that, and so on and so forth. And that may be the right thing to do. But bear in mind that the Natural Environment Performance Panel might also want to do that. And in fact, probably will want to do that. And moreover, may have more expertise to undertake a study effectively of reports of that kind than maybe would be true of the wider membership of this committee. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this approach, but I think we need to be careful to ensure that in trying to strengthen the performance panels, we don't actually undermine their role. And then I'm going to make myself very unpopular here with one final proposal. My panel meets at the moment, it's been agreed quarterly. I don't think that's enough, quite frankly, given the rising scale of the problems that we face, and given that the natural environment needs to be taken much more seriously by this council than perhaps in the past has always been the case. We now have, of course, the 6th natural resources, natural environment, biodiversity, well-being objective in the corporate plan. And given the growing seriousness of the global crisis facing biodiversity and the linked crisis of climate change, and anybody who saw the David Attenborough programme on Sunday night will be left in no doubt about the seriousness of the catastrophe that we are facing, then I think it's very important that the Natural Environment Panel has more capacity, more meeting time to enable it to address what roles in relation to these crises the Swansea Council should be playing in order to address them and ensure that we meet them satisfactorily. So I'm proposing that the Natural Environment Panel meet bi-monthly rather than quarterly, given the scale of the issues that it needs to address. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. In fact, I think I said to Bridge not so long ago that I thought your panel needs to meet more frequently. I'm perfectly happy to support a bi-monthly meeting. I'm sure we can work through the staff issues with that. I'll bring Bridget in a second. I'm sure we can work through the staffing issues as part of that. In relation to your earlier points, clearly the fact that the panel chairs are all co-opted members of the committee will obviously give you a chance to flag up any concerns you have in terms of what we do. My instinct as chair of the scrutiny panel the scrutiny programme committee is that if the sort of issues you've just talked about would naturally go to your panel anyway, and I don't see the point of us doing it if your panel is there to do it and have the expertise to do it. So the last thing I want is duplication, because there are so many other issues we need to look at as part of that. So I'm going to bring Bridge in just to respond to that.
Thanks, Peter, for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It really just to emphasise the point that, look, there are, as actually this report does say, there are changes and sort of possibilities and options everywhere. But what I would really want to emphasise is obviously not to make decisions today. Any decisions about the frequency of panels, given that that's where the lion's share of scrutiny is happening, would need to be taken in the round, looking at the overall programme. And so obviously we're open to supporting whatever activity councillors wish to do, but it really, we need to look at the overall work programme and see how an increase in frequency can be accommodated or fit, and there may well be impacts or implications on other work, the possibility of other work being carried out or not being carried out that you're going to have to consider, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, what I'm going to say as chair of the committee, unless members disagree with me, is that in principle we should have Peter's panel meeting every 2 months, and I will sit down with Bridge and try to work out the implications for that in terms of staffing, to try to make sure we may lose a working party to do that, but to make sure that we can accommodate that, because I think yours is the one that meets most infrequently. And I think we need to make sure that, particularly the importance of that as part of that. We may give you some more work to do as well if you do that, Peter, but we'll see how we go. Okay, unless anyone objects to that, I'm proposing that's an in principle way forward. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Terry. I know you want to come back in, Terry. I'll bring you in next then, Terry. Go on.
Yeah, just to say I support what you just said and what Peter Jones said regarding that particular panel. Supported 100%.
Okay, do you have anything else you want to say? Is that all that's you got?
That's all.
Okay, right. Okay, I'm going to bring Mike White in next then.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just a query, really, in regards to the proposed change with adult services and child and family services. In regards to the situation that we obviously have in current circumstances, is it worth perhaps running these proposed changes with the director? Because if we're going to ask staff to come to us in these areas of service, not to put any stress and pressure onto those staff, because obviously these two areas are very sensitive at the moment, and probably they're working flat out.
Yeah, I understand that, Mike. I think because they are sensitive, and particularly, I think that's why I wanted to get Child and Family Services on the same sort of level as Adult Services. We will check with the director. I can't see a problem personally in terms of doing that, but certainly I think I discussed this with Paxton as the chair of Child and Family Services, and he told me that Paxton is here if he wished. I'm going to bring him in next actually to comment that in fact the workload is quite large for that committee, and he felt they needed to have those extra meetings to cover everything. As current chair of the Adult Services, I feel that we're on top of things, so I think dropping a meeting here or there isn't going to make a big impact on Adult Services, but we'll just double check with the director. But I'm going to bring Paxton in. Bridge, you've got a comment on this particular issue?
Just quickly on, yes, thanks, Chair. On that point, I'm not aware of any negative feedback coming from our sort of corporate management team, directors of social services. I know that our scrutiny officer has already, gone away, because, as I mentioned earlier about the need, the time it takes to sort of, plug meetings in for the year. So I know that she's already made some progress in getting dates in diaries with, relevant directors and heads of service. I'm not aware of any negative feedback, but of course it's something that we, as you say, is important to consider, and with the situation with COVID, and who knows what sort of impact might be around the corner. If we have meetings diaried but they get cancelled subsequently, well, so be it, really. I mean, we'll have to see how that goes, but it's important to actually get those meetings in the diary. But yeah, I'm not aware of any issues, but we can double check on that. Yeah.
Both of those committees have got meetings programmed in already on the 6 weekly cycles, and the director and heads of services are aware of that, Mike. So hopefully we're going to be okay on that, but we'll just double check and everything's okay on that. Paxton.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, there was a time when Adult Services was under a lot of pressure, and it was that point in time, I think, that we went to 8 meetings for Adult Social Services and 4 for Child and Family. Certainly, what we have found of late is that the workload within Child and Family Services has been such that meetings are very difficult to get and completed within 2 hours, and we were struggling to do that. So I do appreciate this change of 6 weekly cycles. It's going to be important, and I've no doubt at all that because of the impact of COVID, that the methods of working in Child and Family Services are going to change to a degree, and I think it's something that we need to be keeping a close eye on and monitoring ourselves. I'm sure the same applies to Adult Social Services, so I think it's very sensible, the move that you get, and I was very grateful, you proposed, and I was very grateful for it. Thank you.
Okay, Chris Holly.
Thank you, Chair. Going through the various recommendations, I think the first recommendation about having the leader in as and when and the other cabinet members is appropriate, and I think that's a good idea, because that does free up a bit of time and potentially does free up some resources elsewhere as well. The next one about the subject agreed to carry out scrutiny of the Public Service Board via committee meetings. What committees are we talking about? Are we talking about coming to this one or to one of the other performance panels?
No, we're talking about the Public Service Board, the 2 meetings of the Public Service Board, effectively being meetings of the Programme Committee. So we effectively abolished the Public Service Board and subsumed that activity into our own Programme Committee meetings.
Right, and the final one, I have no problem with that. The only thing I say about the whole issue around this is I think we need to reconsider what the panels, like the finance and performance one, which I chair, to be perfectly blunt with you, the performance and the finances, it's getting blurred quite a lot, and I think there needs to have a discussion about what we actually do in it, because the finance one is always late. We're always looking backwards, not looking forwards. And the performance monitoring data at the moment, because of COVID and the way in which we program the data, isn't always relevant. So I would look forward to sometime in the future to have a discussion about how that panel works. And I think the other very important issue is that the chairs of all these panels and yourselves sit down and discuss that we do not have overlapping concerns about the various issues that we are looking at.
because there is quite a bit of overlap. And taking Peter's issue for a start off, Peter Jones's issue about biodiversity, you know, there is a lot in that, and that could be covering other panels in education, in performance, etc. So I think we need to have at some stage some form of meeting to discuss what the actual terms of reference of all of these are, because times are changing.
Well, can I just say, Chris, in terms of the finance panel, if the panel itself wants to have a discussion and bring back recommendations to this committee, then I think we can happily look at that and find ways and you know, adjust your terms of reference accordingly. All the panels, as I believe, bring their forward work programme to the programme committee. So at that point, I think we can then pick up any overlaps as part of that. So I think I need to encourage the panel chairs to be a bit more alert to any possible overlaps when that happens. And I think that's quite important that you know, when those work programs come before us on a regular basis, that you look at them and say, well, hang on a second, I'd rather do that, and maybe then question at that point. So we need to maybe a bit more alert to how we do that. So I think it's about question, I think, of the panel chairs being more proactive and coordinating as part of, and I think Bridge, who I'm going to bring in now, will also highlight those issues as well as from the staff point of view. Bridge. Yeah,
just really kind of echoing part of what you're saying really is that our officers who support the performance panels, you know, will, you know, at this time, you know, as we approach the start of a new year, we'll be engaging with performance panel conveners if they haven't already, you know, and having, you know, robust conversations about the work of those panels, particularly where you have, you know, limited time and resources, you know, limited meetings. You know, some of you obviously a bit of anxiety around, you know, how whether those are restrictive or not, but you know, about the focus of those panels, the work that can, you know, that will be manageable, that would be the best use of your time, that's going to have the most impact. So, you know, council, like for example, Councillor Holly is mentioning about, you know, where the panel comes into it with the finance reports and performance reports. These are conversations, discussions that we can have with individual conveners. Of course, you can have them as in terms of a wider group of the committee or outside the committee. So sort of rest assured, really, that that's something that we're also keen to, you know, ensure that, you know, work plans are as effective as they can be. And also, you know, be alive to issues of duplication as well as a committee. So, you know, certainly I think your idea of getting the performance panel work plans once that each panel has kind of agreed their forward work coming back to the committee, so you can look at everything as a whole as well, and you know, have that conversation, you know. And it's great that your performance panel conveners are co-optees of the committee, so you know their voice is around the table as well. So you know, you've got a meeting of sorts there really, or a formal meeting, but yeah, something that we look out for.
And I will add to that if you are interested in this, that maybe myself and Terry as vice chair could host a meeting with panel chairs on a every now and again, just to catch up on issues, you know, if there's things to discuss. So, you know, I'm not saying that's a firm recommendation, but it's something which you want to think about, and maybe we can have like a panel chairs meeting. Terry? You're muted. Yeah,
I agree, and you know, they might even need some support from us as they go on about their work. You know,
I know what's going to happen. If that happens, I'm off. I tell you now.
Sorry, Terry, carry on.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for rudely interrupting me. But apart from that, as long as we're there to back up and support the panels, panel chairs and vice chairs, I think that is very important for this committee. That's all.
Okay, Chris Holly.
Sorry. I do think it's a good idea that the chairs meet to discuss what, or the coordinators meet to discuss what each individual panel do, because I think that is important.
Okay, Jeff, did you want to come in at all?
You said to me, yes, Jeff?
Yeah. Did you want to come in?
I agree. I think there's always going to be an overlap. You know, even with Peter Jones's panel. You know, whatever topic you actually talk about, there are always green issues. There are always finance issues when they overlap with other panels and so on. with regards to my panel, I'm just thinking about a forward work plan. Okay, we got some ideas, but as it's an evolving topic, it's going to be difficult, shall we say.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, obviously, you have a set format in your panel, Jeff. But again, if the panel wants to discuss issues to bring to us, then by all means do that, because that's our role as the programme committee, is to coordinate all that particular work. Okay, unless there's anybody else wanting to contribute, give you a few more. Paxton, no? You're muted, Paxton, if you're coming in.
Just a quickie for my benefit, basically, Chairman. Obviously, when you're looking at the PSB scrutiny panel, you've obviously got Health Board, Fire Authority, SCVS. I'm not quite sure you intend to bring them along. Are you going to have them attending every one of the scrutiny programme committee meetings, or
just the ones where we're doing the work of the Public Service Board scrutiny? Okay. So that'll be two meetings a year. Yeah, I don't want to overload us with co-optees. Much valued as they are, Alexander. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Chairman.
Lovely. Okay, so unless anyone else is coming in, I'm going to propose that we accept this report. Are we all happy to do that? Do we need a formal vote, or are we happy to accept that?
Yeah, go on. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, so that's that particular thing. I think that's all we've got on the agenda for today. So thank you everyone for your attendance and for the very constructive and helpful discussion. And I shall see you on the 13th of October for the conference. There won't be a need for a pre-meeting for that, because basically it's a discussion amongst ourselves. But certainly, so I'll see you all for that particular meeting. Thanks very much again. Thank you very much. I call the meeting to an end. Oh, sorry, hang on a second. Cyril Anderson wants to come in. Sorry, Cyril.
Not a problem, Chair. I just wanted to apologise for late getting to the meeting. Sorry.
Okay, no problem, Cyril. Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody. I call the meeting to close now. Thank you.
Thank you.